Time to talk a little college football with our guy, John Canzano. It's all brought to you by Zeke's Pizza, best selection of pizzas and local Northwest craft beers. You can visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Perfect pie for the football season. Join John on Twitter /X, John Canzano BFT. Read all of his work at JohnCanzano.com. I mean, the man's pumping stuff out left and right. I don't think he sleeps, by the way. John Canzano.com. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe today. You can also listen to his fabulous radio show, The Bald Face Truth, down in Portland, Oregon, 750 The Game. First of all, how are you? You look great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Nobody ever says that to me. They say you look tired. You look tired is the worst thing you can say to someone. Because sometimes I'll be like, I slept great. I feel amazing. And then, your kids will look at you and go, Dad, you look tired today. What are you talking about? Come on.
How many, I asked this question because I was watching Sports Center last week. And the new NBA reporter, is it Shams Charania?
Yeah.
Okay. They asked him, hey, man, how much do you work a day? And I don't know if he was being serious, but they had his analytics for his phone.
Yeah.
And a phone says he's on his phone an average of 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
And they're like, how much do you sleep? He's like,
All right, so
3 or 4 hours. That's not healthy.
No.
So my question is, you're working all the time.
The same day that he did that, I looked at mine, and I was at almost 14 hours of screen time. And what I figured out, average daily screen time, what I figured out, though, was that it was, if you have notifications set for Twitter or any other app, anytime you get a notification, your phone's going to register some screen time, especially if you pick it up and even look at the notification. So I turned off my notifications from Twitter. And a day later, I went from 14 hours down to 8 hours and 45 minutes. A much healthier dose of your phone and screen time, although I shouldn't feel too good about 8 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm 4 hours, four and a half hours. But I don't have my notifications on. Never have. Especially with Twitter and emails. We would get so many corporate emails. I'm like, I don't want that. I don't need to look at it. I'll look at it later. But
yeah, there's a phenomenon out there, and it bothers me. And by the way, Dan Lanning, I had him check his screen time last week. He was at 5 hours, 26 minutes average daily screen time, and he's recruiting. So that's a college football, coach's phone. But there's this phenomenon where, just because you have a phone doesn't entitle everybody who has your number to interrupt you constantly. And so no, it doesn't. We have people, just because you have my number doesn't mean if you call me, I have to pick up.
Okay,
it doesn't mean if you text me.
Who's interrupting you?
It doesn't mean if you text me, I have to text you back. What do people do? They get mad if you don't get right back to them. They're like, I sent you a text. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of a radio show, Mom. Come on, let me get.
You get back. I would say that you're pretty prompt. With me, at least, you're pretty prompt getting back.
I'm too prompt. I think I'm too prompt. One time, I was in the crawl space underneath my house, okay? Friend texted me. Phone notification popped up. I started to answer it, and I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I answering a phone notification while I'm down here with vermin and whatever else in the dark is down under the house?
Yeah,
what is it about me that I feel obligated to respond to that text in real time? Let's get on it.
Hey, viewer, listener, we're going to get to football in a second. But now I could talk about this almost for 30 minutes. What's the necessary amount of time to text back to someone once they've texted you? Right? It's like the old swingers, when a girl gives your phone number, how many days is enough days? How long do you got to wait? Do you have to? I feel guilty if I don't respond right away, but there are times when I don't want to respond right away. I've got things going on.
100%. And there's times when I need info. I'll text to athletic director or university president, and I need something right away. Maybe I'm writing something. Maybe remember we were on air one time and we broke some news here. And so sometimes I really want that feedback, but I really do envy the people who will say, I set aside a time in my day where I respond to emails and text messages. And I'm like, I don't live in that world. For some reason, if you text me, I feel like I need to get right back to you as a courtesy. And I don't know what that's about. That's a flaw in me.
I have a buddy that if you don't text right back, within a couple minutes. Oh, thanks. Good chat. It's always good chat.
I know.
I'm like, come on, man. Like, maybe I was driving. I got something going on. But then I have other buddies that don't respond at all.
Yeah.
Hey, man, you want to grab beer tonight? And like 2 weeks later, oh, sorry, man, I just saw this.
Don't you feel bad, though? The worst one is when I go to text somebody, and maybe I need something, and I go to text them, and I realize they texted me like 10 days earlier, and I never replied. Yeah. That's the worst one. Yeah.
I'm kind of like that. I try to answer right away, but then I do at the end, like in the evening. I go through my phone and I just go, did I miss anybody today?
Yeah.
And then I'll go through it and I'll be like somebody will send me a funny, clip from Instagram. Ah, that's funny. And it's always the standard, ha, 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 funny. Like I need to come up with some new.
Or there's a cut and paste. I texted Kenny Dillingham, the Arizona State coach, the other night. He had a big win.
Losing his mind on the field. Losing his mind.
It was awesome. What an awesome scene. I was one of these guys.
He's like crowd surfing. I was expecting a beer bong to show up or a bong of some sort on that 50, and he'd partake. And I'm not exaggerating. I think if someone had put a hookah of weed in front of that guy, he would have right there on the field. I think he was that excited and had put himself back as an 18, 19-year-old in college.
It's awesome to see that joy.
It was great.
To see a coach
so good.
Who can channel what it was like to be a fan and still looks like a fan. He's 34 years old. I mean, but he kind of hit me back with what I knew was obviously a cut and paste to everybody who's probably texting him. But I didn't need any. I wasn't asking for anything back. I was just great win, man. A lot of fun to see you melting into the crowd on a Friday night.
Great win, thank you. What was the copy? Do you remember what it was? The cut and paste.
It was amen. Amen.
Yeah, that's a good cut and paste. I do the cut and paste too. Yeah. It's a standard. Does iPhone should have that? Maybe they do. Like when you can reply back.
Yeah, auto reply.
Should have an auto reply. You know what the iPhone needs to come up? Hey, Tim Cook, we need to give you some ideas. Can you put when you go on vacation, like a notification on your text? Hey, I'm like you do it to your email.
Yeah,
I'm out on vacation. I'll be back on this day.
Yeah, we should have that. I was trying to tell my kid, my 10-year-old is in that phase right now where she's starting to ask for a phone, and she's starting to play the dad.
Hold on.
Half my class already has a phone.
That's what my son's doing. He's 11.
Yeah. We're on daughter 2, and I know better. I know the longer you can wait to put that device in your kids' hands, the better they are for it, right? Like, we all know what a hassle and all the problems that the phone brings. And I was trying to explain to her, it's just having the phone in the room with you. Sometimes it's a distraction. Having the phone on my lap right now is a distraction. People who bring it to the dinner table, distraction. And so it's just this thing that's hanging out over there waiting to suck your attention away from the world. What did we do before it? I'll tell you what we did, Puck. I would have called you in the morning and said, hey, listen, I'm going to the video arcade. I'll be there at 10. If you don't find me there, I'll be at the elementary school at noon. If you don't find me there, call my mom. I'll try to give her a message of where I'm going to be. Life was just so much easier for all of us, except my mom.
I want the old recording machine back.
Yes.
God, that was the best.
Yes.
Just leave me a message on the recorder and you'd sit by your phone all night. All right. The Dan Lanning, let's get right into I think one of the biggest stories because there's information that's coming out here on Tuesday where the NCAA is going to look into this. They're going to change the rule. The play at the end, I didn't think of it at the time, and I can't remember if I don't think the broadcasters brought it up on it. Broadcast. I think I first saw it on Twitter maybe the next day or maybe later that night. Okay, the pivotal play, they're driving late in the game, obviously, and they put 12 men on the field to incur a penalty, to get a penalty, which is 5 yards, but it takes time off the clock. Lanning admits to it yesterday in a press conference. Yeah, I did that intentionally. Okay, one, great, smart play, way to finagle the system. Why admit to it?
I think there were, and he was real careful with his words, so he did, but he kind of, the way he was smiling and smirking, it was, hey,
I'm smarter than you.
We plan for such situations, and it doesn't come up often, but we plan for a number of situations. Look, I agree with people who say it was brilliant. I think it was smart. I think, you know, it raises a debate about ethics. You know, it raises a debate about, like, you know, the rules committee. You know, apparently they left this option open to Oregon. Is it a coach's fault if he exploits a loophole or chooses this option as the best option in that moment? This isn't like a patient's dying on the table and you have the ability, you know, do you say, not biomedical ethics here, okay? So, you know, this isn't the trolley coming down the track. There's 5 people on the track, pull the lever. You can save 5, but you kill 1 innocent person. This isn't that kind of dilemma. But Oregon had options that were available, and the coaching staff obviously in that moment went, look, we put an extra defender on the field. We have an extra defender back there to break up the pass. We are going to get flagged 5 yards if they catch it, but it cost Ohio State 4 seconds that Ohio State needed. Those 4 seconds were more important to the game, the outcome of the game, than the play. And so I look at it as a great strategy move. This is no different than the goalkeeper holding the ball while time is expiring in a soccer match, or taking an intentional 5-yard delay of game penalty to give your punter or your kicker a better angle or better field position, or Chip Kelly rushing to the line of scrimmage and running 3 plays while the defense doesn't have time to adjust. The rules committee's they're gonna come in and they're gonna probably say that the team has the option to put the time back on the clock and take the penalty, or they're gonna call it unsportsmanlike conduct. They're going to adjust to this rule. I don't necessarily blame Lanning for exploiting it. I think he wants people to know that he and his staff are a bunch of geniuses. That's what I think. That's why I think he owned it.
Exactly. That's why he wanted everybody to know. And you know him much better than I do. I think he wanted, and I like him. And that was a signature win. And we've talked a lot about him not having these signature wins, these moments. And I think that's why we talk about emotion, Kenny Dillingham. I loved his emotion after the game. I mean, he fired up. You know, he should be fired up. You know, that was a huge win for them. But I don't like when people think they're the smartest guys in the room. And then I really don't like when people want to brag that they're the smartest guy in the room. Yeah. And I thought that's what he did on Monday. I'm going to tell everybody how smart I was. And here, maybe the NCAA, John, looks at it because it was brought up on Twitter, I think, that night. But maybe they don't. Maybe this is not even an issue, but the fact is that he admits to it yesterday. Yeah, I think it becomes, on the forefront, and they're going to change it. I think probably the easiest thing would be, because on sportsmanlike conduct, I mean, how do you prove it? How do you improve intent that that's what they wanted to do? I would just say it's a 5-yard penalty. Time goes back on the clock.
Yeah, and look, it's not lost on me that if you watch the sequence, Oregon calls timeout. Right? Sure. Right as Ohio State is snapping the ball. Will Howard was going to be sacked by an Oregon defensive player. It was a messy play. They weren't ready when they snapped the ball. Ohio State looked like a team that had not played in a close game. Oregon had played Idaho, had played Boise State, looked much more prepared to be in that situation. But Oregon calls timeout. I think if Dan Lanning lets it ride, his defense makes the stop. They get a sack there. And, we're all talking about how great the defense is. Instead, we're talking about this. I think that is one of the casualties of this. But I'm left looking at it going, this is a 38-year-old head coach who had a lot of questions about, can he win a big game? Can he outfox Chip Kelly and Ryan Day? Tosh Lupoi as D coordinator, we talked about it. Like, was that a mismatch? I think he heard that all week. So I do think it was important to Dan Lanning for everybody to know, hey, we outfoxed somebody today. And I think there's a little jealousy out there, Puck. I think there's a bunch of people who are looking at Oregon going, they're spending the money. Yeah, they won the football game.
I know where you're going.
My program's not Oregon. And so there's some jealousy about this that we have to be real. If Ohio State had done the same damn thing, the Oregon fans would be complaining about Ohio State. And, it'd be even worse if it weren't two $20 million football programs competing against each other. Can you imagine if it were Washington State or Oregon State on the other side of that thing?
Yeah.
There would have been so much outcry, but I'm okay with it. It's probably not what I would have done, but I'm okay with it because I think it ends up looking and being really smart.
It was a great football game. I mean, it really was just sensational. Before we get into the game, because I want to I think we had question marks. I think we talked about it last week about Dillon Gabriel. Well, he passed with flying colors on the biggest stage. And I do like what was the country singer he started singing? Was it Luke Combs? Like
no, somebody else. I can't remember.
Yeah. But yeah. Oh shoot! Now I lost my train of thought. I was going to ask you about Oregon. Oh goodness.
Well, let me talk about Gabriel.
God, I went with Dillon Gabriel, and it was a perfect. Oh, I know what it was. I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead.
Post game, is there a history between Lanning and Will Howard?
I don't think so. But
you've seen the video, right?
I saw the video. It looked to me like Lanning wasn't sure what to do there. And and he was really fired up. And I think that there are a lot of things Dan Lanning does, whether it's coaching decisions or actions or things he says, that have to do with he's 38. This is his first time as a head coach. I know he's in season 3. He's coached some games, 26 and 5 or whatever, 28 and 5 as a record. But there's a lot of things he does that I attribute to there's no way in 10 years he's going to be doing these same things. We all watch coaches evolve and grow. And I think after the game, he was so fired up, I couldn't tell if he was mad at people or he was excited. A lot like Kenny Dillingham, who he watched, obviously, on the Friday night, celebrate among fans, and now Dan Lanning's getting his moment. But there's just some things in there you wouldn't see Dan Lanning at age 48 probably doing. And I think that's probably more to it. I don't think there's any bad blood there or anything against Will Howard, but I saw it too. It was just kind of awkward. It looked to me like he didn't know if he should reach out and tap him on the shoulder and say, good game, or let him walk away. There was a lot of emotion going on around Lanning.
Sure.
I just think it's one of those moments that requires you to step back a little bit. And I think he handles that differently as he's aging.
How does he handle the Oregon wide receiver who was ejected for spitting in the face?
That was so selfish.
That's just stupid.
What a stupid, selfish play.
God.
And Trayshawn Holden has apologized, and obviously, the team's going to suspend him or have repercussions there, right? So, but the bigger thing is, it's, to me, like Anthony Newman, who played 14 years in the NFL, happened to be sitting next to me in the press box. And I asked Anthony Newman, have you ever been spit on? Had you ever, as a defensive back, have you ever had anybody spit? And he was like, nobody. That did not happen in the NFL. That did. And then he said, well, you know what? He remembered Shannon Sharp at one point had spat on one of his offensive linemen at some game. And, he said,
well, that's a fetish for Sharp, though.
But it was like, it was like so infrequent and so. But the obvious thing is it's a really selfish play as your team just makes a big play. You're down in the red zone. You're about to punch it in. It ultimately resulted in what could have been a 4-point swing in that game. And if you look at Oregon, has an apparent interception that Dan Lanning does not call timeout and get a review on. He has a field goal in the third quarter he should have kicked. He doesn't kick it, cost him 3 points. They miss a PAT. They chase points and don't get a 2-point conversion. There was like 11 or 14 points that Oregon gave away in a game where you had very little margin. So I hope they learned something from that victory as well.
All right, what did you learn from Dillon Gabriel? 341 yards, 23 of 34. He was he was great.
It was awesome. The offensive line, did not give up a sack in the game. He had all kinds of time. I really question Ohio State's philosophy on defense, especially in the red zone. They seem to content to let him sit back a little bit and pass. And we've all seen that those interceptions that Gabriel committed in the red zone were because he was rolling, he was under pressure. Gabriel was fantastic. He used his legs more than he had in some other games. So I thought it was interesting when he tucked the ball and ran. He's a real problem. He had a 27-yard rushing touchdown. But he answered a bunch of questions in that game and looked fantastic. He looked like a winner. There are still some things that happen, though. He's on the short side stature-wise, okay? I don't want to make too much of this because he makes plays. But he gets some passes deflected. And he doesn't see receivers sometimes that are wide open. More than any quarterback at Oregon that I can remember in recent history, and again, we're talking about guys like Herbert and Bo Nix and Marcus Mariota, but he doesn't quite have the vision that those guys have. And, he had a wide open Terrence Ferguson running a seam route. He didn't see him. I think it's because he's on the shorter side. He's got a big offensive line. I just think sometimes he doesn't see the field as well as some of the other QBs. But this was a big game for him. It wasn't perfect, but it was really good.
You referenced it a little earlier. I read the quote. I haven't seen the full press conference and the back and forth and really what led up to it. But you have the Jedd Fisch quote where he's like, hey, you know what you watched on Saturday, Ohio State and Oregon, two $20 million programs going up against each other. This is what we're up against. He seemed to shift the blame, and I really don't like when coaches do this, to shift the blame back on the fans. That if you want to compete, this is how I took it. Maybe this is not what he was trying to say. Well, I'm just saying this is how I took it.
That you're seeing coaches do that.
Yeah, if you want to compete, this is what it takes, fans.
Yeah.
You guys got to start paying up rather than, hey, man, coach better. The reason you are 4-3, a lot of it is because of coaching, not the players.
It's not like Rutgers outspent Washington. It's not like
Washington
Iowa.
State didn't outspend them.
Yeah. They beat you. And I think the problems at Washington have more to do with just the turnover of a coaching staff.
Of course.
And what you lose in the transfer portal. And I think ultimately they'll be all right. But he's got some proof of performance. He's got some resources. But yeah, I mean, he's using that as an opportunity to bang the drum for the collective and tell fans, hey, if you want a winner, you've got to invest. We're hearing more coaches talk about it. Coaches are talking about the inequity between the spending that a school like Oregon and a school like Ohio State can give. But I think in this brief window, in this next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see the schools that spend more on NIL have better players. I mean, that makes sense. In the meantime, what really is going to happen once you get once you get a system that now allows the schools to kind of spend to a limit, it's going to become more important, like where you allocate your money. And, oh, by the way, you're not required to spend there. I still think you're going to hear a faction of schools that are not spending $20 million on their roster complain that they don't have $20 million to spend. And, we're at Tennessee, they're putting a ticket tax that is on the season ticket price that basically is 10% for player acquisition. You've seen Oklahoma State talk about QR codes on the helmets or whatever.
They tried to do it, and who jumped in to prevent it? The NCAA?
They got shut down. But I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see the programs just blatantly go, hey, if you want to buy tickets or you want to buy a parking pass, here is a tax that we've put in here to help us, make that payment. And it's just going to become normalized in the part of the cost of winning. But it's poor form after a 40-16 loss to Iowa to come out and point at that like that was a fan issue. It's
a sore loser mentality. And honestly, it's this, again, I know people are going to take this the wrong way. It's a Coug. Oh, you're a Coug. You're just hitting on them. But it's the second time he's done this. He did it after the Apple Cup where he blamed the players. And then he's doing it again where in a roundabout way he's blaming the fans for not giving me enough money to get better players.
And I don't know if it speaks the love language of fans, because I think there are a faction of fans that might go, oh, yeah, I'll give a little extra. A coach is saying he needs it. But I wonder how many are just turned off by that and going, hey, look, why don't you put some of your salary back into this? There's a real issue there if you're not having success in how you frame it. And you hear coaches all the time will talk about how young they are, how they're in transition, how they lost so much in the portal. Oregon State is down 7 defensive linemen. They've had a tight end playing defensive end against Nevada. They have no healthy defensive players. Utah's had all these injuries. You only to a certain extent can you cry about the problems that you have. It's your job to work around that and MacGyver it.
I loved MacGyver. It was amazing all the things that he could make out of like bubble gum and a paper clip. Yeah. And all of a sudden he's got a gun or a bomb.
Well,
I don't know how he did it.
In putting on this show, you probably have some MacGyver stuff. You got something taped somewhere. You got, you find a way. You quit complaining. Show me the baby.
Find a way. And I don't. Maybe Fisch. He makes $7.75 million. Yeah. Maybe Jedd Fisch is giving money to the collective, and that we don't know about it. But
I don't know if they can. I raised that with a coach last season. That maybe under the new rules they can. But there was some issues with coaches making direct donations of their salary. But there's ways.
indirectly. Yeah.
Somebody asked, some of the SEC schools, how did you get around this back in the day?
Speaking of Oregon State, hey, real quick, is there bad blood between Nevada and Oregon State and Jeff Choate? They won the game. Oregon State is a good team. They're down a bunch of players, but maybe it's because Nevada is I guess left behind, and there's animosity because what happened with Pac-12 and the Mountain West and all that. But Jeff Choate really taking a shot at Oregon State and really at Washington State, calling them the Pac-Who.
Yeah.
And after the game, what did you make of that?
Yeah, I thought that was poor form too. You win a game, you rush for 350 yards. Like, he knows, he's got to acknowledge that Oregon State has 7 defensive linemen out. They took a guy who played tight end and said, we need you on the defensive line. They couldn't stop Nevada. It's going to get worse for Oregon State. They have UNLV and Boise State still on the schedule, and they have no run defense. And so Oregon State's just trying to stay relevant and visible. But yeah, there's some bad feelings in the Mountain West. I mean, Nevada and UNLV are sitting back going, hey, you didn't pick us. You didn't take us. You didn't think we were worthy of being a program. But there's something about taking the high road there and being a little classy and just saying, hey, look, we won the football game. It's a good win for Nevada. You don't need to dance on the grave of Oregon State's defensive line. That said, Pac-12 should be more in tune with what victories like that mean. You saw it in the Apple Cup.
Right.
It's huge. It's huge for the program that got left behind to win that game. Oregon State wishes it could have beaten Oregon in the Civil War.
Yeah. Cam Rising injury. Is he really going to try and come back for an 8th year?
It's there for him. I don't think he's going to come back. He had said before this season, he was telling people privately that this was going to be it, even though he had the potential even for one more season. And
yeah.
I think watching him on Friday night was really painful.
He couldn't move, John. He couldn't move around.
Couldn't move. It was, I went out the other day to the local Little League field with my kids, and I asked him to time me with a stopwatch running the bases. It was that. It was. You don't have it anymore. I'm sprinting. I'm rounding second.
In your head, you probably thought you were flying, right?
I looked great.
I play old man basketball on Mondays, and in my head, I made like some turnaround moves last night, and I'm thinking, God, that's a great play. I wish there was video on it to see how bad and like slow and awful it looked. I wish your kids. Well, if you would have give your 10-year-old the phone, we could have seen it. But we don't. You're one of those parents.
But the point is, look, Rising is a champion, and I remember a couple of media days. I was there in Vegas. It was the last Pac-12 media day in Vegas with all the football teams there, and Cam Rising's there and Cam Ward was there. Both those guys are there, right? And I've got Rising doing a one-on-one interview, and then we're just chatting after the interview, and I hear, "There's the GOAT! There's the GOAT!" And I look up, and it's Cam Ward walking over to Rising, and they're hugging and shaking hands. And I thought, gosh, what a cool moment that these quarterbacks know each other. And now one of them's gone in the portal to Miami, and the other one, he just doesn't have it anymore. And there's a point, if you're Utah, where hanging on to the illusion of Cam Rising becomes such a distraction that it drags your program down. And they needed to hand the keys off. They need to be able to go out and recruit quarterbacks that can come in and help right away. Yeah. It was really sad. He could not complete a 15-yard pass, and we know that guy can make that play.
Yeah, it was a tough watch. We've got a great slate of college football games coming up this week. What do you think the reaction in Tuscaloosa would have been had Alabama lost last week against South Carolina? They got Tennessee this week, so it doesn't get any easier. But what do you think the reaction would have been?
I tuned into the Alabama-South Carolina radio broadcast, and I grabbed the Alabama Homer broadcast late in that game, and you could feel a little tension there, that they were a little worried that hey, losing to Vanderbilt, you can write that off as a one-off, but if it happens again, you can't. Now you have a problem that you have to address. I think that this is life in the new world for Alabama. There were competitive advantages. I had, look, when Nick Saban retired, I reached out to coaches everywhere and said, what do you think? Why is he retiring? And, there's a coach in the ACC who said, he realizes everybody's got, the advantage now. He said the SEC was doing NIL long before. So, he's lost an advantage. The program's lost an advantage. The playing field is somewhat leveled, even though there are still some schools like Ohio State and Oregon who have advantages. Alabama doesn't quite enjoy the advantage it has before, and Deboer is going to end up holding the bag on that one, even though it's probably not all his fault. It's more of the system changed around him.
I had this great conversation with some buddies playing golf on Sunday. The NFL versus college football. We all agree that we much prefer college football. Like, it's not even close. Like, we would sit down all day Saturday and watch college football opposed to sitting down all day Sunday to watch the NFL. I'm going to assume you feel the same way.
I do.
I have my reasons. What are yours?
I like the regionality of college football. I like the traditions. I like the differences. I used to like that the conferences had an identity. The Pac-12, was this big offensive conference with quarterbacks, and the Big Ten was very physical, and the SEC, had big defensive tackles, and there was just real regional differences and identities that were developed in those conferences. In the NFL, everything kind of is this amalgam of the same, with the salary cap and coaches popping up at other different teams and the life cycle of quarterbacks, and it just doesn't feel as unique to me. What happened at Autzen Stadium on Saturday, it's never been louder, Puck. That stadium has never been louder.
It's great.
The fans not only stormed the field, they didn't leave. They stayed on the field forever, and they were just down there. There was a 78-year-old guy who, reached out to me. He hopped the railing and went down on the field, and he said to his son,
Awesome.
come with me. And his son said, I'm too old for that. That's the kind of stuff that was happening.
It's great.
And it's just, you don't get that in the NFL.
No.
Fans don't storm the field in the NFL. Fans they're busy fighting, and
that's the thing. It's fighting, and I know it happens in college football, but it's the fighting. It's leaning up against the urinal. I always do that.
Yeah.
See, a guy can't complete a sentence and all that. I was wondering when is the last time? I'm sure it's happened. An NFL team has stormed the field after a win. A fan base.
I don't know.
Like, I'm curious. It's happened once, I would assume. I'm curious, but I'm with you. It's all that. It's the pageantry. It's the students because it's a younger audience because they're there. It's the bands. It's all of it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's even close. I mean, I like the NFL, obviously, but not like college football. And this is despite this sport, them ruining the sport, and I still love it.
And there's still an immaturity, and I don't mean this in a negative way, about the players in college football. And Trayshawn Holden spits at an Ohio State player, and we were all disgusted by it, and he deserves to be ejected. But there's also this aftermath where we all kind of go, we did stupid things too when we were 18, 19, 20 years old. And so there's a real feel there that you don't have in the NFL, and it's just too big of a business. I hope college football never loses that.
Yeah.
I also think the games being played on Saturday, what do we do on Saturdays? We play youth sports on Saturdays, so there's just an element there as well.
Yeah. Your partner in crime on the podcast, on the Canzano Wilner podcast, and I want you to, I don't know what's coming up, what's the latest one, but so I want you to promote it before we cut you loose. His big thing, and it's is this whole the record of these Big Ten versus Pac-12. Crossing two time zones and all that. And I'm curious because one, it clearly is in the favor of, these teams, or it's not in the favor of these teams that got to travel, right? Yeah. They're losing at an unbelievable pace here right now. But I am curious about, do you really think it's because of the travel, or it's just one of these coincidences? Like the Oregon, I just want to go through these games real quick. Yeah. Like the Oregon-Ohio State game, that could have gone either way. I mean, it's Ohio State had every chance to win. Penn State is flat out better than USC. Yeah. Maybe they sleptwalk through the first half, but they're just a better football team. Iowa, it's at home. They don't lose at home. The score, they punished them. UCLA is bad, right? They lost to Minnesota at home. That's just a bad football team. I mean, Oregon crushed Michigan State. I don't think anyone gave Michigan State a chance in that one. We mentioned UCLA being bad. They get crushed on the road at Penn State. Washington, they did beat Michigan at home, but let's be honest. That is not a good Michigan team. They don't have a quarterback. Minnesota beat a soft USC team. Wisconsin came into the Coliseum. USC would edge them. Northwestern came out here. They're not good. Washington beat them, and there was one more. Indiana, we've touched on this before. Again, UCLA is just not good, and Indiana trounced them. How much of it is it just it's coincidence of some of these games, or there really is a factor built in?
I need a bigger sample size, but 13 times this has happened where teams have crossed multiple time zones in the Big Ten, and the road team is 3-10 in those games. And in the 3 wins that that the home teams have, or in those situations, they didn't cover the spread. So I think it's more of a case of the travel is a factor to some extent, but I think it's more of a case of the good teams who are at home win games. And Oregon playing that game at home, huge advantage. I don't know if it was the travel for Ohio State, but I can tell you Autzen Stadium made a difference in that game. And I am a little bit pumping the brakes because UCLA has been involved in a couple of those games where the traveling team won, and it's just true that UCLA is not very good. Right. And so, there's too much being made of it, but it's worth tracking because when you see 3-10, Puck, I mean, you start to see a trend forming here. Sure. Let's see what happens when there's another 10 or 11 of these games played. And, are we talking about 6-20, or does it start to even out a little bit as, the teams, Washington going across time zone to play at Penn State? Anybody think they're going to win that game? No, they're not going to win that game.
Like the Rutgers-Washington game. Washington should have won that game. I don't think the travel had any effect on the kicker missing the field goals, nor do I think that they had to travel out to New Jersey let a kid to run off a sideline after a blocked field goal.
Yeah, but pay attention to Oregon going to Purdue this Friday.
You think that's a trap game?
There is a psychological thing there. Yeah. I looked at Oregon's 6 remaining games, and of course they're going to Ann Arbor, they're going to Madison, Wisconsin. Those games are harder games than Purdue. They've got Illinois at home. That's a harder game, I think, than going to Purdue. But after that, I think the Purdue game on Friday is a tougher game from Oregon than Washington at home later in the year. I just have not been impressed with Washington. I think Oregon will beat Washington pretty easily at home. But going to Purdue after they've changed coordinators, I covered Purdue in 1998, 1999. Drew Brees was the quarterback. It's a weird place to play. Could be psychologically tough coming out of that Ohio State win. I'm going to pay attention to that. But if Oregon goes in there and beats Purdue, that's going to be one in the win column for the visiting traveling team. So I need a bigger sample size. It's definitely on my radar, though. And, as much talk as we have done about the athletes in other sports, we're starting to see some belly aching about it in football. Even James Franklin at Penn State was saying that they had to bus to a nearby airfield because they couldn't get a 747 capable of getting all the way across the country on their runway. It wasn't long enough. So there's some things here that are worth paying attention to, but let's not count it as a wholesale indictment of the traveling team.
Last thing for you, let's say USC continues to slide, right? Yeah. They're 3-3. They're at Maryland, Rutgers, at Washington, Nebraska, at UCLA, then Notre Dame. I'm just trying to think. They've got probably, 1, 2, maybe 3 more wins. Well, 3 more wins, 4 more wins in there. Anyways, let's say they pull the plug on Lincoln Riley. 1, do you think that's a possibility? 2, does my favorite athletic director why not? Just see. Pick up the phone. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Hey, Kalen. It's Jen. Remember when I hired you at Washington? I should come back home.
Well, you think about that. Jen Cohen has gone from having to manage, Kalen DeBoer, who is an adult, to what she's dealing with at USC right now.
Yeah, he is unreal.
It's the only issue there is the amount of money that you're going to owe Lincoln Riley. That was $110 million, I believe, over 10 or 11 years when they hired him. What is he in? Year 3, 4?
Yeah, and he's just so smart. I hate his press conferences after the games, scolding reporters and sitting up there in between the athletes like he's got to babysit them. What are you doing?
He at Big Ten Media Day in Indianapolis, he was getting hit pretty hard by media who were saying, do you think USC is still an upper echelon program? And he pushed back against that. But if you don't win these games on the field, and you can't compete, and you're sitting at 3-3, you're effectively eliminated from the college football playoff with your third loss or so. And you're sitting in that position with games left to play. It doesn't bode well for you. And so I think the only question is, can they afford to fire him with that much left on the contract? And then, because I always look at an AD, it's a bad position for a coach to be in. When a new AD comes in, it's not your person, it's not who hired you. You start looking around the room and you realize nobody else in the room was there when you were hired. That's when you're in trouble. You have to win. And if he's not winning, there will be, people will get restless at USC. But I don't know if Deboer is the first call because of the deal he has at Alabama. But is Jonathan Smith not the second call? I mean, how quickly do you pivot there?
Yeah, for sure. Right. Come back to the West Coast. Yeah, I mean, if I'm Jonathan Smith, I'd jump at that
Dream
opportunity.
Job for him. He grew up at USC games, sitting in the Coliseum. I was with him when Oregon State played there before a game. He pulled me aside. He pointed up at the stands at the seats they used to sit in.
Yeah.
To him, that would be making it, getting home. Is it too soon to leave Michigan State? It's never too soon.
Yeah, get on out. And that's why we're going to let you get on out of here. John Canzano with us every Tuesday, brought to you by Zeke's Pizza, best selection of pizzas and local craft beers from the Northwest. Follow John on Twitter at John Canzano BFT. Read all of his work at johncanzano.com. Listen to the radio show, Ballface True 750 The Game. Also, his podcast with John Wilner, the San Jose Mercury News, Canzano and Wilner. What do we got on tap this week?
Well, I got to call him up right now about Dan Lanning's decision and the ethical questioning that is going on. It's a great sort of ethics and sports debate. Like, if a rule loophole is available to you, do you take it? Do you have an obligation to take it if you're a head coach and you're paid to win games? So that's online there. We got an interview with Bob Thompson on the podcast. So a lot in front of us on the Pac-12 media rights front.
Good. All right, there he is, John Canzano. Check it out on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Leave comments there. Also on Apple and Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And, of course, one-stop shop, all up at pucksports.com. We'll talk to you next week, John.